Right, so we're back. Took a little bit of a break, but we got NBA playoff action now. We missed the start of it, so we're a few games in, but it's been a wild few games. We got to talk about it now. So we're going to go through our predictions for the remainder of the first round games, and then we're also going to get into how we see the rest of the playoffs going. So a lot of big matchups tonight, a lot of big matchups that are happening later this week. So yeah, just hyped to get into it. It's been a great playoffs so far. So yeah, first round, Miami and Boston. How are you feeling about this one so far? Game one, game one was pretty decisive. Not really a lot to question about game one. It was, yeah, yeah. It's the same deal. Jimmy is not returning. Playoff Jimmy's been eliminated from the playoffs. So without that, you were talking about it earlier. Miami, what do they have really? Bam is all-star level player. Not enough. Tyler Hero, not enough. They have, other than that, it's a lot of like role players. It's a lot of the Miami culture guys, but they don't have that star guy. They don't have someone to lead them through this. And the Celtics' whole starting lineup is full of star guys. So it's very straightforward series. Celtics, you know, while a respectable, 20-point margin in game one, I see them continuing to win. This is an easy sweep for me. So, maybe without Jimmy, like I just don't see them having a way to do it. If they do get a game, it's gonna be like a colossal failure from the Celtics. And we'll talk about that again. We'll talk about that. We Celtics have shown that inability to really follow through in the playoffs. They failed a lot of times. So, maybe that recurs this season. But I think with Porzingis, with Drew Holiday, Derek White is continuing to be what he is. I think they have enough outside of Tatum and Jaylen Brown to, at least make it through this series unscathed. We'll see about what happens further into the playoffs. Yeah. You know, it's been a great, the first two games, I feel like this has been easily the most exciting series of the playoffs so far. Like, unbiased as well. Like, I am biased, but from an unbiased perspective, I feel like that's still true. Game one, yeah, like game one was just back and forth. We did not play very well, but still managed to pull it through. Josh Hart turned into prime Ray Allen in the second half and just started hitting threes that he hasn't hit all season. And then last night, Brunson still, it's not like he scored like 20 something points, 25, 26, whatever points. So it's not like he's playing bad, but when he's taking 25 plus shots and he's shooting 20 something percent from the field, like that's not enough for us. That is a bad game. So for us to still have guys like DiVincenzo, Hart again, Hartenstein stepping up, that was huge for us. And that ending sequence, so we were down, 5 points with 27 seconds left or something like that. And we got three from Brunson, three from DiVincenzo, free throws from Anunoby to close the game. Like, that was great. One of the best sequences of Knicks basketball I've ever seen. And, in terms of the series, I feel like that I saw Embiid crying in the locker room. He looked like a broken man. I like Maxey. He's really the only one on Philly who I like. Tobias Harris, worst max contract in the league. Nick Nurse is a whiny complaint, the worst coach in the league. Like there's, I just, and I think them filing a grievance about the game and all the complaining they're doing about the calls, it just shows that they're in the wrong place. Like it's not for them. It's not about like, you know, we should have like, oh, this is what we can do better. Like, we need to pick up our game. It's like, oh, we've been wrong. Like we are winning, but it's getting taken away from us. Like it is getting taken away, but we are taking it away from you, not the refs or anything else. So, I, exactly. I feel like that mentality just shows that I don't know, they're not in it the same. I don't know. What do you think? How do you feel about the first two games? Because I'm hyped about them. It's different for me because I was like I was I've been waiting for this. So I don't know. It's not the same. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm going for the sweep just because because I'm feeling hyped off of yesterday. I could see, but again, like game three, I think this is the biggest game for them. Philly coming home, like they're gonna have the fans are gonna be there for their first playoff game. This is like going down 3-0 is a very different thing than being down 2-1. And I think the biggest thing is like the biggest X factor for us is going to be Brunson. Again, like he's not been very efficient in these first two games. They've done a great job of defending him between Kelly Oubre, Batum, and then they've been forcing him right a lot more, which he just hasn't been able to hit those shots in the same way. If they can continue to implement that and just make it difficult for him, then they're gonna keep having these close games. But Brunson's just hitting three or four more extra shots. Like that's the difference between us, only winning, by those free throws at the end, or us winning by 7 to 10 points. Like that's a significant difference in the playoffs. Any game it is, but in the playoffs, that's a significant difference even more. And I think Brunson's performance is really going to be the biggest thing that determines whether or not we're able to just finish them off or if the series is going to go a little bit longer. Yeah, it's just been off. Mhm. Yeah, yeah. It was like before, when before game one, I was feeling very strongly about the Pacers. They are a great young team. I feel like between them and Orlando, and we'll talk about that next. But I felt like one of them was due for a breakout, postseason. That they both have young, emerging teams. Like this is going to be their opportunity to get an upset over a higher seeded team. I was feeling stronger about, you know, Indiana, honestly, just based off of Halliburton. I think he's, probably the highest caliber player out of either one of those teams. But Dame is higher caliber than anyone on Indiana, clearly. Second half, he did nothing, but his first half was enough to push Milwaukee through. I don't know. I was leaning Indiana, but after the way game one went, it, it could go either way for me. That I, was, I guess, overestimating maybe the impact of Giannis being out. It is still significant, but I don't know. Game one altered how I feel about this series significantly. How do you feel about it? Yeah, yeah. I think I have to keep faith in one of Indiana or Orlando, um, and I'm gonna stick with Indiana. Like I think that even after game one, like they have a very explosive offense. I think that's the biggest thing. They're a young team, they're an energetic team, and they have a lot of guys who can score on Milwaukee. I think just especially without Giannis, especially after how gritty game one was, like that's gonna wear on Milwaukee. They're an older, they're a more experienced team, but this is what you run into, especially in the playoffs like this. So I feel like Indiana is going to be able to pull through. Game two is going to be huge to that. Obviously, I think if Indiana pulls off the win tonight, then that's going to change. That's going to give them so much momentum heading into Indiana. And if they go, imagine if they win both of those home games, they come out 3-1. Like that series over. So this game can give them a lot of momentum. Not over. Yeah, 3-1, but Doc Rivers and maybe Doc Rivers will redeem himself after maybe this is his redemption arc. But I think tonight's game is going to be a huge indicator. But I'm still going to keep faith in Indiana. I think that they'll be able to figure it out and get momentum at some point that they'll be able to carry through the series. Yeah, I mean, I think that's been the biggest like just what you mentioned about their offense. It's not that they've played poorly defensively, like they've held Cleveland's under 100 points in both games. Donovan Mitchell exploded in game 1, but game 2, they were able to hold him back a little bit more. It's still just I don't know. I feel like Cleveland, like you said, they're handling their business. I was hopeful that, this would be the end of the Donovan Mitchell Cavaliers. It still may be, depending on how round 2 goes, but yeah, I feel like this is going to be a Cleveland, 4 or 5 games. I'll give Orlando 1 game at home, but if this goes back to Cleveland for a game 5, I think it's over at that point. Mhm. Okay. Yeah, I mean as a Knicks fan, as a self-respecting Knicks fan, I can't come on here and say I can't predict the Knicks loss. So Knicks in 7, just you know, just because I have faith in our team. But that would be a difficult series. Like Boston, they're wait, no, we play Milwaukee. Oh yeah, Celtics Cavs. No, Celtics Cavs, Boston, Boston I think sweeps. Or not sweeps, but like I think they handle Cleveland. I think that does yeah, I was like, I think that does end the Donovan Mitchell Cavs. Um, yeah, they're I think yeah, I think Boston. To be fair, I do think Cleveland matches up well. They have the big men to kind of cope with Porzingis, and then that Garland Mitchell backcourt. It's pretty dynamic. Like they have a wide. They I think physically they match up well with Boston, but talent wise, Boston just has too much for them. And again, Donovan Mitchell, for as good as he is, this is like kind of his ceiling. Like I feel like this is the Cleveland has become the Utah of the East when he was there. Like that's where they're at. They're they can be a top 4 seed. They're not a bad team, but if he's the best player on a team or the like far away the best player on the team, they're not going to win a championship. They're not going to get that far, and Boston's just better. So I see that. I see Boston making it through there. Yeah, Knicks and 4. Easy. We maybe not in 4. Maybe 5. I don't know. I feel like we play we play like a type of basketball that the Pacers like we would slow the game down a lot. I think the Pacers need like kind of a more fast-paced game. They need to be able to take advantage of their youth, their shooting, kind of their ability to play up tempo. We do the exact opposite of that. Like we play physical game, a lot of rebounding. Not that, we're not, we're still getting points, but it's in a different way than they are. And I think defensively, we've seen it in this series so far. We've really upped the intensity a lot more than we saw in the regular season, which is impressive to say, given how well we played them. So I feel like that's a series that I'd feel comfortable with. If it was Milwaukee, especially with Giannis back, that that's very different. But against Indiana, I feel confident. So, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll let you go first since I started off with this prediction. I was talking about the end of the bracket at the start of it. So, Yeah, Knicks in seven. I think that similar to what you said, like I think Boston, to be fair, this is their first season with this new team. I think having Drew Holiday and Porzingis is, very significant. Like I think that changes the dynamic because before, if Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum has an off game, which they were having frequently in the playoffs, you only have to stop one of them. That became the situation, and you can stop one guy in the playoffs. Like we're seeing Philadelphia do that to us right now. Like you can stop one guy in the playoffs. You can make that happen. But with those other options, Porzingis mostly offensively is a stretch five. That changes things for them. I do think we match up really well. And I do think that, our center, like, I do think we match up well. I think our center combination, like, is a lot better than what most teams are going to be able to provide in terms of guarding Porzingis and the interior in general. But again, I think Boston's going to have that meltdown, like you're saying. And then also just health wise, like Porzingis in particular, he's stayed reasonably healthy this year, but this is around the time of year where something always happens with him. And even if it's not him, I think that it's more important than Boston making it to the conference finals and the finals. They need to make it there unscathed and healthy. And that is just as important as them not having that meltdown. If they're not healthy and they have the meltdown, it's going to be even worse. So I I think those both play a factor, and I am counting on one of those things ending up impacting them going into the conference finals for us to beat them. Yeah, I'll let you go first on this one. Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's a great point. That like even though they're I guess I think it's fair to say that they're like the Thunder are definitely the least experienced team in the playoffs. I feel like the Pelicans are probably the next least experienced team in the playoffs. Especially past the first round. So I do think the Zion health plays a big factor, but I think the Thunder, I think this series I agree. I think they're comfortable, but I do see them going through some adversity here, especially after how game 1 went. I think that was a lot a lot closer than it needed to be, especially for just a 1 versus 8 matchup. The seeding's all different because of injury and the play-in tournament now, obviously. But that's not as close as that matchup should be. And even if they do well in their next game, and that's maybe they have a more comfortable margin of victory going into game 3 in New Orleans. That's going to be I think those two games, New Orleans definitely takes at least one of those. Like I see that being first away playoff game for a lot of these guys. New Orleans isn't the craziest fan base, but especially if Zion is back, that's going to be I think that'll be a challenge for them. and I see that maybe pushing this game to or pushing this series to 6 games potentially. I could see this going 6 or 7. I still think OKC wins, but I think this series will test them more than a 1 versus 8 series you'd expect. This is going to be different than Boston, Miami for sure. Yeah, I mean, outside of outside of DiVincenzo's series, or like outside of the DiVincenzo three yesterday, like that Jamal Murray buzzer beater was. I mean, objectively, that was probably a crazier play. Like that was just took it down, no timeouts called, isolation on the right hand side, won the game. I didn't watch all of the game. I know the refereeing. I saw you were talking about it earlier. It was some like iffy calls throughout the game. LeBron said it about it. Said something about it afterwards. So these games have been close. The Lakers have been doing well. Like it's not like they're getting blown out, and you could say that maybe there's some things going against them. They're away as well, but Denver, I think, is too talented for them ultimately. I think, Jamal Murray, again, pulling through in the playoffs. He had a great fourth quarter. Jokic, showing that he's an MVP level player. And honestly, like Michael Porter Jr., for all the other stuff going on in his life, is like doing a great job right now. Like just playing his role. Like that's something that I think is really like it's wild between Jonte, rest in peace to his NBA career, and then his brother getting arrested, like or getting sentenced rather. That's just a lot to go through, and I think for him to be like, and like I think he just for him to be able to make the contributions he is and consistently as well is really key to them winning. So I feel like across the board they're getting what they need right now, and I do think LA is going to challenge them. Like this can be a 6 or 7 game series as well, but I feel like Denver comes out on top ultimately. Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say I feel like this for me. This is like probably my. I think this is the best series in the West. It's between this and the Clippers Dallas, but for me this is the best one. And game one was like I think more than anything, and we were talking about it earlier as well. Anthony Edwards, like he showed out. Like this playoffs could really be his opportunity to take that next leap in his career and to be considered a different type of star. I mean, after I guess how are you feeling before the series, and then after game one, how are you feeling now? Yeah, I was feeling that I thought the Timberwolves were going to win this series before. I wasn't, you know, foreseeing Anthony Edwards doing what he's done, but after seeing game one, I think it makes me feel like I think this could be, and I don't know if we have one. Yeah, like I don't think we predicted any other ones. I think this is going to be our sweep in the West. I think that Minnesota, you know, especially after that last game, I mean, like you said, Anthony Edwards was just going ISO with Kevin Durant and just nailing him. Like he was hitting, like his offensive bag is so deep. That team, with Rudy Gobert down low, like you said, they have the consistent bench. Mike Conley has managed to be on another playoff team. Like they just have so much experience and depth, and then the talent leading them, and Anthony Edwards. Like I think they're a lot better built team than people give them credit for. And I think that, heading into, the rest of the bracket in the West, they have a really underrated chance of, doing something significant. So I see them, I'm going to go with sweep here against Phoenix. And, again, like you were saying, I think this is going to be the Anthony Edwards show, not only for this series, but for however far in the postseason Minnesota goes. Yeah, they, yeah, it's like you got one series left. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it was. Uh, I think the biggest you were spot on. Like, I think the Clippers have really good depth. Even without Kawhi, and I don't think there's really any trusting his health at this point. Like I don't know. There's no telling whether or not he's playing and whether or not he's healthy when he's playing. But outside of him, they have a lot of depth and a bench that contributed a lot. Westbrook played well. Mann played well. Amir Coffey. They have Mason Plumlee. Like they have solid guys. Dallas's bench and really everyone, I guess, PJ Washington's a starter, but outside of him, Doncic and Kyrie, they didn't really have anyone else to do anything. I think Tim Hardaway, Dante Exum, Josh Green, like they have guys on their bench who have done things throughout this season. They need more consistency out of those guys because it's not like Kyrie and Luka played bad. They both had 30 plus points. So I think they are holding up their end of the bargain. I think it's really going to come down to the bench doing a bit more, and that's going to be on Jason Kidd really for their rotations, and just putting those guys in a position to be able to hit the shots that they need to, and then those guys hitting those shots. So I think I don't know. This is an interesting series. I do think ultimately, like Luka and Kyrie, I feel like that's one of the most talented backcourts ever. You could argue very easily that that's the most talented backcourt ever. And without a healthy Clippers team, like I ultimately see them prevailing. Like I struggled to see them going out round one this season for them. I think is like I don't know how far they go in the playoffs, but I don't see this being a round one exit for Dallas. I could see the Clippers being aging, being more injury prone, relying on a lot of these more experienced guys who are towards the tail ends of their careers a bit more. I can see them faltering as opposed to Dallas, who, they're hitting their peak, probably haven't even reached it yet. So I'm going to go with Dallas. I could see this going 6 or 7. I think this could be another longer series, but I think Dallas has this at the end of the day. Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think that's you know, the Thunder have great perimeter defenders like Lou Dort. Um, between it was Case and Wallace who had the last defensive play um, in Game One for them. They have good perimeter defenders, SGA as well, but I just think Kyrie and Luca in the playoffs, that's going to be too much for a first round team again. Like, I think Dallas, if they are able to get through round one, they're going to have that momentum. They're going to be, and I think Dallas is going to have a lot more, like, they're going to believe that they can beat OKC. Like, that's a different thing going up against Denver for them or, going up. I think Denver's really the only team in the West that holds, like, that's in a different tier. Like, I think Denver's the Boston of the East. But I think Dallas is just as good as every other team in the West, and ultimately, I see them beating OKC. Maybe that's another 6 or 7 game series, but I think they end up beating OKC and making it to the conference finals. Yeah, this would be a crazy series. Like, especially, I think regardless of how this first series ends for Minnesota, like, they come out of that and Anthony Edwards keeps doing what he's doing. This is going to be a huge series between them and the last season's champions. I'm gonna I'm gonna go with Minnesota for this. I think it's I say that I think the one thing Gobert is not going to be able to stop Jokic. He's never been able to stop Jokic. Jokic is going to cook Gobert every game of the series. Like that, I think 100% happens. But again, I think Minnesota has solid depth. I think they have enough guys, and I think Anthony Edwards is, you know, he's in that same. If this postseason he can push himself into that same tier as a Jokic, if he's gonna continue to be performing at that same level, I think they're gonna be able to match Denver and probably even beat them. So I see that being, again, that's a 6 or 7 game series. Um, but I'm gonna go with Minnesota for that one. I see them getting through. I mean, I feel like this is probably like easier than any of the other series for me, at least. I feel like Minnesota definitely. I think Minnesota wins. I think Minnesota matches at like, I think again that Kyrie Doncic duo is great, but I think Minnesota matches up really well against them otherwise. Like, I don't think PJ Washington or Derek Lively are able to have the same impact against Gobert. I know I said Jokic would cook them, but Gafford is not going to have impact against Gobert. Um, and I think that Minnesota has, again, just between Anthony Edwards, being as dynamic as he is, they have enough shooting around him to, just cause Dallas problems. I think that, their bench is consistent and deep enough as well. I feel like Minnesota, if they're going up against Dallas, I see them being able to take that series in, you know, 5 or 6 games. I don't know if that goes, maybe set. I don't. I feel like 5 or 6. I feel like that series would be done faster than some of the other ones. All right, so we're going. So both of us have Boston, or I guess no. I have the Knicks in the East. I guess I have the Knicks making the finals, but we'll say. But for the sake of this, we'll both go Boston in the East, and then up against either Minnesota or Dallas in the West. I mean, how do you feel about your series there for Boston versus the Mavericks? What do you said what you wanted, but how do you see that series going? Yeah, it's tough. Again, like I agree with you. Boston is the best team in the league, and I do think that they're due a championship. Like, between that Tatum, Jalen Brown, this group of guys, they've made it here. They lost, but they've been around. Like they're due a championship at some point. I really struggle to see them not getting. a ring at all. Um, I do feel like, as much as it pains me to say it again, like I could see this being their year, like 100%. Like I think going into that series against Minnesota, I begrudgingly think that they win, and probably, 6 or 7. But I do think Minnesota is what I know, with Dallas, you're saying they don't have enough star power, and I do agree with that. Like if they played Dallas, I do think they'd win too. But I think Minnesota, again, just their athleticism, their length, and their depth, I think they match up really well with Boston. Between Jaden McDaniels, you have Gobert, you know, Mike Conley on the perimeter with Anthony Edwards. Like they have enough guys to, cause Boston problems. So I could see that being a good series. I see Minnesota having more of a chance than Dallas. Um, but like at the end of the day, I think Boston, you know, barring any type of meltdown or injury or something like that, like this feels like their year on paper. So yeah, yeah, I'd say Denver. Yeah, I'd say Denver to repeat. Like I think the winner of that, I think the winner of that Denver Minnesota series is like that's the team that's coming out of the West for me. And you know, and if it's Denver, I could I could see Denver beating Boston again. Um, a lot more than I could see Minnesota. I think whoever wins that Denver Minnesota series, or just the winner of that matchup, the like Denver Lakers Minnesota Phoenix, like that's going to be the team that has the shot at beating Boston. I feel like so. I we'll see. I favor Boston in that series. Kind of regardless, but it's going to be one of that four, definitely. Yeah, no, we were or the Knicks. So we got enjoy the games. We're gonna watch all of them, and yeah, Knicks in 4 every series until the finals, and in the finals too.